Yes, I can hear.
Yes, Vijay.
Okay. Okay, let me start the session. So in yesterday's session, we have understood how to make use of these complex screen elements up to breadcrumbs. So in today's session also, we are going to use the same screen elements, but by fetching data from backend system via odata service. So here, we're going to make use of something like drop-down box with backend values. So we'll try to create label with select screen element, which is technically drop-down box, but this time with backend values via odata service. Similarly, we'll try to create label with something like combo box with backend data via odata service. We'll create multi-combo box with backend data via odata service. Label with multi-input with backend data via odata service. Similarly, radio button group with backend values with the help of odata service. We can also use something like tokenizer with backend values with the help of odata service. And we can make use of breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs also can be used to populate data coming from backend system with the help of odata service. So we'll try to target these things. Whenever you are trying to get data from backend system with the help of odata service, first you need to know the odata service details. So in our case, so we started using odata service in our application development, that is this one, Z8AM CRUD odata project SRV. And we used odata service fields, that is user ID, first name, last name. These are the fields we were using when we started creating Fiori project. These are the fields that were part of this odata service. And these field names are case sensitive. Wherever you use these fields, field names are case sensitive. And odata entity set, this will collect data from backend. It will display data in the front end. That's the purpose of entity set. So we were using EMP set. Let me write this note. Odata entity, odata service fields, and odata entity sets are case sensitive. We are using uppercase as lowercase, lowercase as uppercase, then you'll be in trouble. So it's case sensitive, be careful. Should use it as it is. And here, say suppose if you don't have these details, you've created a project and you've forgotten to get those odata service details, then you need not worry. Here, odata service details can be collected from in two ways. Like one is from metadata.xml file. From metadata.xml file, from theory front-end app you can collect. Or you can collect from SEGWT code, that is a backend transaction code. So we have already used this particular OData service, but I don't know what fields are available in that service. What is the entity set? In that case, you can directly go to metadata.xml file. So here you can see okay, you can see this is our OData service project, which contains object view.xml file. Yesterday, we have created all these screen elements by populating static values. So here you can see in our project, there will be metadata.xml file. You can see this. This metadata.xml file contains the OData service details, the service which you have consumed. For example, here you can see so in metadata.xml file, you can see this service contains entity type EMP, which internally contains fields. And you can see the key field is user ID here. And these are the list of fields that are part of this particular OData service. And these field names are case sensitive, please remember. If you are referring these field names in your coding, you have to use it as it is. The service project, the OData service project, whichever is consumed in the front-end app, so that service details will be available in metadata.xml file. And if you scroll down, okay, so here if you scroll down, you can see the list of entity sets will be available. So here you can see metadata.xml file internally contains the list of entity sets. In this case, we are trying to use entity set as EMP set here. And what is the service name, that also can be viewed here. So this basic information will be available inside your metadata.xml file in our Fiori project itself. So please notice that. Okay, so the same thing, whatever I've written here, those are available in that particular metadata.xml file. List of OData fields and the name of the entity set. These are all case sensitive. And this is a service which we have consumed at the time of project creation. So now at this stage, you can collect from metadata.xml file. When we start OData development, I'll tell you where exactly SCGW will be available, how to create project, etc. In the future, we'll discuss that, SCGW. Now here, when you are trying to fetch data from backend to the front-end application, you have to consider three important things here. Our intention is to fetch data from backend in this today's session, as well as in the coming days also, we are going to do that. So whenever we fetch data from backend, there are three important things that you need to consider. Let me write it here. When we fetch data from backend system to front-end application via OData service, we consider the important points here. One is like so here, if you closely observe this select screen element, it's technically a complex screen element. For complex screen element, there will be an aggregation property, as I told you yesterday. I shown you in the documentation as well. So items is an aggregation property. So you need to recognize what is aggregation property of that complex screen element. And for this aggregation property, we need to configure entity set of OData service. So, okay, let me just go to that screenshot. The same details available here. You can see there is a complex screen element. I want to get data from OData service. First, recognize what is aggregation property. For that aggregation property, you need to configure entity set of OData service. If you are expecting data from backend, configure entity set of OData service. So that is what we need to do here. So configuration of entity set of OData service will be done with aggregation property. That is the first point you need to notice. Let me write it here. For complex screen element, there will be an aggregation property. For aggregation property, we need to configure entity set. For aggregation property, we need to configure entity set of OData service. What's the purpose of configuring entity set of OData service? The purpose is simple. Entity set will collect data from backend and display data in front end. When you do that, what happens is entity set will collect data from backend, it will display data in the front end. That's the reason why we have to configure entity set of OData service for aggregation property of a complex screen element. Very simple. So this is one main point you need to notice. If you're expecting data from backend to any screen element, it can be dropped down table, list, chart, microchart, multi-combo box, whatever. Going forward, just you have to remember this note. And second point here is for internal screen element. Here you can see for complex screen element, there will be an internal screen element. And internal screen element contains its own properties, regular properties. For these properties, you need to maintain data binding relation with odata service fields. So there will be an internal screen element for complex screen element. For internal screen element, you have to configure properties with the help of data binding. You need to establish relationship. That means here you have to establish data binding with odata fields here. That means odata service fields. So maintain data binding with odata service fields here. So this is a second point you need to notice. For internal screen element, there will be regular properties, or simply call it as properties. For properties, we need to maintain data binding relationship with odata fields. So for internal screen element properties, we need to maintain data binding relation with odata fields. Data binding is just name of the relation between backend system fields and the front-end screen element properties. Okay, so the third point, let me just make it here. Data binding. So data binding is the name of the relationship between backend odata fields and front-end screen elements properties, or simply call it as front-end screen elements. So data binding is the name of the relationship between backend odata fields as well as front-end screen elements. So that relationship we are calling it as data binding. So these three important notes you need to remember if you are expecting data from backend to the front-end screen elements. Now let us do that here. In this diagram, okay, so here let me just, and please remember that yesterday itself I have already highlighted the above pattern is applicable for all types of OData services. It can be OData ABAP service, OData CDS service, OData Extend service. It doesn't matter. Whatever we are writing here, all these things are same. The front end part remains same. The backend service can be anything. So that means these points are common across all OData services. Right. So here, add one simple note here. For aggregation properties, these are aggregation properties. For aggregation properties, what you need to do, just configure entity set of OData service for aggregation properties. That is important. And here you can see there are internal screen element properties. For internal screen element properties, you need to establish data binding. That means maintain data binding with OData fields. That means backend fields. And this should be done for internal skin element properties. So this should be done. That means maintaining data binding with odata fields has to be done for properties of internal skin element. Okay, so just remember these two basic notes, then life will be very simple going forward when we use all these skin elements in different stages. Okay, let me save this. Now to start with, let me go with select skin element here. Drop down box with backend values via odata service. So how to do that? What's the syntax? Let us understand that. So you can implement below code. Same syntax has to be followed for all the skin elements. So first, you can go to this object view. Just in continuation within the simple form. Inside the simple form, you can start writing the skin elements. This time we try to use the same skin elements with backend data. So here first let me add label. Example, select name or first name, something like that. You can use some text direction. Sign. This is just a label. Now our focus is on complex skin element, that is select skin element here. So this is a complex skin element. So you have to use begin tag, end tag. Same like yesterday, you have to use begin tag, end tag. Compulsory. But here, for this select skin element, there is an aggregation property. Items is an aggregation property. So yesterday what we have done, we have used for static values, we are using aggregation property also with begin tag, end tag. We were using items begin tag, end tag for populating static values, hard-coded values. But the same property, same aggregation property should be used for backend data also. But what you need to do is, instead of using begin tag, end tag, on complex skin element, use that property here. On complex skin element itself, use that property. Aggregations is a aggregation property. Items is aggregation property here. So use that here and just use flower brackets. Within flower brackets, use slash and configure entity set here of odata service. Configure entity set of odata service. Items is aggregation property, equal to, use double quotes, flower brackets. Within flower brackets, use slash entity set. So that's how you need to deal with this. Now, complex skin element contains what? Item as internal skin element. So internal skin element, you can use it here. That is core item. Yesterday also we have used it. Item is an internal skin element. And here it contains key and text properties. It contains key comma text properties here. So for this, what we need to do? We need to maintain data binding relationship with odata fields. In our case, let me use user ID for key property, first name for text property. I want to use these two odata fields here. But first name field will be displayed in the front end because it's a text property. So if you want to maintain data binding, use flower brackets and maintain data binding with odata field. That is odata field 1, something like this. And here also you need to maintain data binding with odata field 2. But text property, whatever is used as part of text property, that is used for display purpose. So in our case, for key and text, I want to use odata field 1 in data binding, odata field 2 in data binding. So here, for aggregation property, you have to configure entity set. The entity set is EMP set. So that EMP set will collect data from backend and it will display data in the front end. So let me use EMP set here. And let me use odata field, for example, user ID. Text property, maintain data binding with first name odata field. So this is the overall approach you need to follow for all the complex screen elements when you're expecting data from backend to the front end. Okay, let me save and run it. Let me go to second screen. Here you can see there is a drop down box and all these values are coming from backend system via OData service here. These are supplied to the front end through OData service with the help of entity set. Entity set will collect data from backend, display data in the front end. So user can select any record here. The selected value can be captured by writing code in event handler. If you want, you can use width property. Let me add width also. A common property. And save it. So here you can see there is drop down and these are the values coming from backend via OData service. Okay, so let me explain the syntax. So you can use this code. But how exactly code is implemented, let me just take this screenshot. Let's think about this. Okay, so here, select in this case, it's a complex screen element. And items, in this case, is an aggregation property. This is an aggregation property. Items is an aggregation property. And here you can see EMP set. EMP set is the entity set of OData service. Entity set of OData service. That is what we need to configure. Why entity set? Because let me just write a simple note. Entity set will collect data from backend and display data in the front end. Entity set collects data from backend and display data in front end. Front end app or whatever. So you need to configure entity set just to collect data from backend and display data in the front end. And this configuration of entity set should be done for aggregation property. Please remember this. In the future, SAP may give new screen elements. You need not panic. Ultimately, it has to follow this technique. It can be any new screen element. If you're expecting data from backend for that new screen element, just you need to recognize the class name, the aggregation property, and configure entity set. That approach remains same. So here, this is the internal screen element. Item, this is an internal screen element. For internal screen element, there will be properties. So here, key is a property, maintains data binding relation with odata field. Text is a property, maintain data binding relation with odata field. So here, we have to maintain data binding relation with odata field in this case. Field 1, field 2, something like this. This is data binding with, you can call it as field 1, odata field 1. Similarly, this is data binding relation with odata field 2. If you want, you can use normal properties like width, something like that. But this is the overall syntax you need to follow. If you're expecting data from backend system via odata service, it can be dropped down or any screen element. It can be dropped down table, list, chart, microchart, but ultimately you have to follow this technique. Okay, let me save this. Select coding pattern. Now let me go with other screen elements. For example, I want to use combo box with backend data through odata service. So you can implement below code. Let's use the same approach. So first let me take one label here, same like this. Now I want to use combo box. Combo box is a complex screen element, so use begin tag, end tag. Use begin tag, end tag. That's compulsory. And within this combo box contains, again, items as aggregation property. So that property should be used directly on complex screen element. Don't use separate begin tag, end tag if you're expecting data from backend. So directly use that items here, that aggregation property. They're going to configure entity set here. And if you want, you can use width. And in this case, item is again an internal screen element. So use that here, core item. And if you want, you can directly use text property, but let us use key as well as text. So this key property can maintain data binding with odata field 1. Here also you can maintain data binding relation with odata field 2. So in our case, the entity set is EMP set. EMP is uppercase, set S is uppercase. So try to use as it is. So EMP set. OData field 1 here, user ID and first name I want to use. for odata field 1. So let me just use user ID. For text property, odata field 2, let me use again first name here. Let me save and run this. Okay, so here you can see there is a combo box. Combo box is also getting all these values from backend through odata service. So user can select value from existing list, or user can enter a new value here. That is possible. That's the advantage of combo box here. You can have an input with a new value, something like XYZ. User can select value from existing list, or he can enter a new value. Working fine. So let me take these lines. Now here, let me go with multi-combo box. With backend values with the help of odata service. Implement below code. Okay, let me take the same type of label. And here I want to use multi-combo box. A complex element. Use begin tag, end tag. For combo box also, items is an aggregation property here. For multi-combo box, items is an aggregation property. So let us use items again. And if you're expecting data from backend, don't forget use / entity set of odata. And the internal screen element is again item here with key comma text. So you can use those things for item. So maintain data binding here with odata field 2, something like that. For key property, maintain data binding with odata field 1. So entity set in our case is emp set. And here odata field, let me use user ID. For text, let me use first name. So let me save it. Okay, width, let me use width also here. So you can see now there is multi-combo box, and all these values are coming from backend via odata service, and each value contains a checkbox here. You can see this. So user can select multiple values here, and those selected values can be captured by writing code in event handler. So it allows multiple selections here. But the values are coming from backend via odata service in this case. So we can select a number of values. Okay, so it's working fine. Let me copy these lines. Let me go with multi-inputs. Again, with backend values through odata service. So we can implement below code. So let me take this label once again, same label. Okay, so here I want to use multi-input. Multi-input, it's a complex element, compulsory you have to use begin tag, end tag. And here, for multi-inputs, Aggregation properties, suggestion items. Items will not work. You have to use suggestion items. If items is working, it's okay, but if it is not working, this is the compulsory one. Suggestion items, I think, is a default aggregation property. So let me use it here. Suggestion items. Configure entity set of odata service. And then you have to use internal screen element here, that is item. So let me use it here for item. And you can use key and text properties. For this, you have to establish data binding with odata fields. Establish data binding with odata field. So here, entity set, in our case, it is EMP set. One of the odata field in data binding, let me use user ID. Another field is, for example, first name. If you want, you can use width. For example, 250 pixel. Save and run this. So here, suggestion items is aggregation property. We are configuring entity set. Item is internal screen element. For internal screen element properties, we have to establish data binding. Okay, so let me run this. So here you can see there is multi-input. Let me type something like A. Then you'll get two values. There are two values starting with A, but these are the values coming from backend. If I type something like S, you can see the collection of values starting with S coming from backend. If I type K, then you can see there are 4 values coming from backend. So ultimately, this also allows multiple selections here. Multi-input is just an alternative for multi-combo box. You can type A, then you'll get the values. Type K, then you'll get the values. The values are coming from backend via odata service. Don't forget that. So working fine. Let me use this. Okay, let me remind you the syntax once again here. Let me take this. So in this case, multi-input, it's a complex screen element. It's a complex screen element. Suggestion items. Suggestion items is aggregation property of that complex screen element. Aggregation property of that complex screen element. And then entity set. EMP set is an entity set. This is, here you need to configure entity set of odata service. This is to collect data from backend and display data in front end. Don't forget this. We're configuring entity set just to collect data from backend and display data in the front end. That's why we have to configure entity set. And the entity set is case sensitive. And then this is the internal screen element. Item is an internal screen element. Internal screen element contains properties. For properties, we have to establish data binding relation with odata fields here. establish data binding relation with odata fields. So here, data binding relation with, for example, odata field 1. Similarly, here also data binding relation with odata field 2. So the same syntax we are trying to follow for all these complex screen elements whenever we are expecting data from backend. So this is the overall syntax you need to remember. It should be on your fingertips. It can be table, chart, microchart. The overall approach remains same. And the backend service can be anything. It doesn't matter. Okay, this is multi-inputs coding and the syntax pattern. Now let me go with radio button group now. Let me try this. Radio button group. Backend values via odata service. So you can implement below code. Let me try this here. First, let me take some label, same as earlier. Then here you need to use radio button group. Radio button group. Complex screen element, so use begin tag, end tag. That's compulsory. Now radio button group contains buttons here, buttons as aggregation property. Buttons as aggregation property. So let us use that here. Don't use buttons like this. Begin tag, end tag. That is required when you are expecting static values. This is for static values. Yesterday we have used it. But in today's session, we are getting data from backend. So that aggregation property should be used on complex screen element directly here. It's buttons. Aggregation properties button. So for that, use double quotes, flower brackets, / entity set here. Simple. Now buttons is having a relation with radio button as internal screen element. Radio button as internal screen element. So let me use radio button here. Radio button. And radio button contains some text property. You can use that. And here you can use flower brackets with odata field name. So radio button contains text property. For that, you have to establish data binding relation with odata field. Okay, so here entity set. Entity set is like EMP set in our case. Radio button text, I want to display first name here. Save and run this. So if you scroll down, you can see there are radio buttons here in vertical manner, but all these values, the values for these radio buttons are coming from backend system via odata service. You can see this. So earlier we used to populate static values here yesterday, and today we are getting the same type of radio button group, but with backend values in this case. Now here, If you want, you can use another property like columns. Columns is one of the property. You can use it on radio button group. Columns, example, columns 9. And save and run this. Now you can see all the values are displayed in terms of 9 columns here. This is one single radio button group, but all the values are coming from backend for these radio buttons. So user can select any value. Selected value can be captured in event handler. That we are going to do it. So for radio button group, buttons is an aggregation property. Radio button is an internal skin element. For aggregation property, configure entity set. For normal property of internal skin element, maintain data binding with odata field. The same pattern we are following for all the screen elements. Now let me go with tokenizer with backend data. Tokenizer with backend data. So you can implement below code. So here, let me take one label. And I want to use tokenizer. It's a complex element, use begin tag, end tag. And this tokenizer contains tokens as aggregation property. So let us use that here, tokens. For this aggregation property, always use flower bracket slash, then provide entity set here. It will collect data from backend to display data in the front end. And then there is token as internal screen element. So here you can use token, and I think it contains text property. You can use that. And here you can maintain data binding with odata field. Data binding with odata field. So in our case, let me use first name here. The entity set is EMP set here. Okay, let me run it. So now you can see all these are tokens. These are coming from backend via odata service. If you closely observe this, so these are the values coming from backend via odata service here in the form of tokens that are displayed with cross mark here. Okay, so copy these lines. Now let me go with one more screen element, that is breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs with backend data via odata service. You can try this code. So let me take label here. So breadcrumbs, it's a complex screen element. Use begin tag, end tag. And breadcrumbs contains this one. Breadcrumbs contains links as aggregation property. So configure entity set for that. Breadcrumbs contains links as aggregation property. Use double quotes, flower bracket slash entity set here. And here it is supported by link as internal screen element. So you can use link as internal screen element here, and it contains text. Let us use that. So for internal screen element property, just configure odata field. That is data binding with odata field. So entity set, let me configure emp set. Odata field, same, let me use first name here. It will be displayed in the form of hyperlinks with underline. So here you can see these are hyperlinks that are displayed, but these are the values coming from backend through OData service here. If you want, we can assign some event handler that will do it in the coming days. But as of now, these are the values coming from backend through OData service, and they're displayed in the form of breadcrumbs, which is similar to tokens. Right, so I'll try this code. Now let me give some very important rules for implementing the script code, or for implementing the XML code, not script code. So here we have to understand some basic XML syntax rules for writing XML code. Whatever we have done today, yesterday, and day before yesterday, that's a XML code here. But while writing XML code, we are using ui5 framework with libraries, classes, properties, methods, events, etc. While writing this XML syntax, we are using the libraries, classes, properties, events, etc. from SAP ui5 framework into Fiori application. So that's the reason why you need to follow certain syntax rules here. XML coding rules, let us make it like this. SAP Fiori apps. Rule 1 is for library. Whenever you use library name, that must be lowercase always. Library name must be lowercase. Please remember that. Library name must be lowercase. So here you can see we have used library name like SAP UI core, SAP UI layout.form. So we have used several libraries here. Whenever you use library, it should be lowercase. The complete library name must be lowercase here. You can see that. Otherwise, it cannot load that library. It cannot load library. It cannot load its classes. So the point here is rule 1 library is, it must be always in lowercase. Don't forget this. Very simple. Rule 1 is for library. Library name must be lowercase always. Otherwise, the framework will not load these libraries and it cannot recognize the classes of these libraries. And you will get an error, obviously, if it is not following this approach. Rule 1 is for library. It must be lowercase. Okay, let me mention that here. For example, here we have used SAP has provided SAP.m. It's in lowercase. So similarly, if you are using our libraries, it should be in lowercase always. SAP UI layout, SAP UI layout.form. SAP UI unified, SAP UI core, SAP suite, UI microchart, whatever may be the library, it should be always in lowercase. SAP.viz, coming days will be using it. An example I've written here, and all these libraries should be in lowercase. Whenever you use, whether it is ui5 or Fiori or whatever. And second rule, okay, let me save this first. This is rule 1. Now rule 2 is for class name. How to use class name? Every screen element contains a class. So here, first word, first letter must be uppercase. Second word, first letter must be uppercase. Otherwise, you'll get syntax error. It will not load the output in the browser if you don't follow this rule. It cannot recognize the class name. So here, when you're using class name, first word, first letter, uppercase, second word, first letter also must be uppercase. For example, slider. Slider is a class, S is uppercase. Text screen element is a screen element class, T is uppercase. Input, I is uppercase. And then there is image, I is uppercase. And we have used simple form class. There are two words here now. Simple form class, simple S is uppercase, form F is uppercase. Simple form class, S is uppercase, form F is uppercase. There are two words, each word first letter should be uppercase. And similarly, we have used rating indicator. Rating indicator, rating R uppercase, indicator I is uppercase. We have used something like progress indicator. In the coming days also we are going to use it. Progress P is uppercase, indicator I is uppercase. And multi-combo box. The three words here. Multi M is uppercase, combo C is uppercase, box B is uppercase. There can be three words, but each word first letter should be uppercase here. Multi M uppercase, combo C uppercase, box B uppercase. So it can be any class, but it has to follow this rule. First word, first letter, uppercase, second word, first letter, uppercase. If there is third word, then that also should be uppercase for first letter. So here you can see, let me go to this to make you understand that. Okay, so let me use like this. So here you can see we have used simple form. S and F is uppercase here. Simple form is a class. You can see label is a class. Link is a class. Image is a class. I is uppercase. Input is a class. I is uppercase. Label is a class. L is uppercase. Simple form. S is uppercase. Form F is uppercase. So you have to follow this rule. And not only that, here you can see if you scroll down, there are other screen elements as well. Let me just add like this. Make you understand here. So rating indicator, R and I is uppercase. Slider S is uppercase. Progress indicator, P and I is uppercase. Date picker, D and P is uppercase. So this rule is applicable. First word, first letter, uppercase, second word, first letter, uppercase. If there is third word, then the third word, first letter also must be uppercase. Okay, so let me take this. Let me mention here. That is rule 2. Rule 2 is on class name. The first word, first letter must be uppercase. If there is second word, first letter must be uppercase. And if there is third word, then third word, first letter also must be uppercase. So this is rule 2 applicable for class name. X application, Y application, whatever may be the application, when you're using class names, you have to follow this rule. Okay, very simple. This is rule 2. Rule 2 is for class name. Now, what is rule 3? Rule 3 is for properties, methods, and events. Rule 3. This is same rule. Rule 3 is applicable for properties, events, as well as methods. Rule 3 is applicable. Same rule is applicable for properties, events, and methods. What is that rule 3? So first word, first letter must be lowercase here. Second word, first letter must be uppercase. First word, first letter must be lowercase. Second word, first letter must be uppercase. This rule is applicable for properties, events, and methods. Rule 3 is common. For example, we have used max value property. Max value, that's a property. So max value is a property. Max M is lowercase, value V is uppercase. On progress indicator, we have used one property, percent value. So percent P is lowercase, value V is uppercase. P is lowercase, for percent, value V is uppercase. Because first word, first letter lowercase, second word, first letter should be uppercase. There can be text property here. There is single word, that is text, T is lowercase here. There can be width, the single word, width, W is lowercase here. Height, single word. So first word, first letter, it is lowercase. If there are two words, then first word, first letter lowercase, second word, first letter uppercase. This is applicable for properties. Not only properties, in the coming days, we are going to use events, like change event. For example, change is an event. Change, C is lowercase. Then press is an event. So press, P is lowercase here. Live change is an event. So live change, there are two words here. Live L is lowercase, change C is uppercase. Live L is lowercase, change C is uppercase. The same rule is applicable for events. And then, for example, selection change is another event. Selection change is one of the events. Selection, S is lowercase, change C is uppercase. Selection, S, first word, first letter lowercase, change. Second word, first letter, C is uppercase. Similarly, we are going to use some methods in the coming days. For example, set text is a method we are going to use. When we set width, we can use some methods like this. In the coming days, we are going to use it. These are all methods. So when we use methods, also you have to follow the same rule. Rule 3 is common. Set text is a method. S is lowercase, text T is uppercase. Set width is a method. S is lowercase, width W is uppercase. Set height, S is lowercase, height H is uppercase. Add style class. Add A is lowercase, style S is uppercase, class C is uppercase. First word, first letter only should be lowercase. Remaining words, first letter can be uppercase. Only first word, first letter should be lowercase. It can be properties, events, or methods. Second word, first letter should be uppercase. So this is a common rule applicable for all these three things: properties, events, and methods. So here, in our case, we have used it somewhere here. If you closely observe, so here you can see there is value property. V is lowercase here. Value property, V is lowercase here. And you can see width property, W is lowercase here. Rows is a property, R is lowercase. And here you can see text direction. Text direction, there are two words here. T is lowercase, direction, D is uppercase. Direction, D is uppercase. So you have to follow this rule. First word, first letter lowercase. Second word, first letter is uppercase. Direction, D is uppercase here. Okay, so this is rule 3. Rule 3 is applicable for properties, events, as well as methods. That is, first word, first letter must be lowercase. Second word, first letter onwards, it can be uppercase. Second word onwards, first letter can be uppercase. First word, first letter lowercase. Second word, first letter uppercase. Common rule for properties, events, and methods. That is rule 3. So this is rule 3 for properties, events, as well as methods. Now there is rule 4. Rule 4, that is, when you are using odata fields, when you are using odata entity set, odata fields, odata entity sets. That is for rule 4. So odata fields are case sensitive. Don't forget that. Odata entity set is also case sensitive. Whatever is available in the backend or whatever is part of metadata XML file, the same convention you have to use it. In the backend, OData service contains SEGWT code. How it is registered in the backend and how it is registered in metadata.xml file. In the same manner, you have to use it in your further coding when you're using OData fields and entity sets. Both are case sensitive, otherwise you will not get the output. So here you can see, for example, I'm using multi-combo box. Okay, let me go to this multi-combo box with backend data. Multi-combo box, I'm using EMP set, but I'm using EMP as lowercase here. EMP SCT. Intentionally, I'm using EMP as lowercase, but in the backend is registered in the uppercase. So what happens now? So for this is drop down combo box, this is multi combo box. So multi combo box here you can see it is not showing the values. It's not showing the values at all. Press F12. Here you can see it is throwing an error. What is that error? You can see here. When you press F12, it throws an error here. Okay, if you violate any rule, it will throw an error. In the browser, you can press F12. Go to console section. Press F12 in browser. First, what you need to do, run app in browser. Run app in browser. Run app in browser, press F12 and go to console. Check the error. So that's how you can follow this technique. Okay, let me put it like this otherwise. Okay, so here you want to check the errors, go to console section in the browser. And here it is clearly saying that you can see not found for segment EMP set. Resource not found for the segment. Okay, let me just. Okay. So here you can see it is clearly saying resource not found for the segment EMP set. That means there is some problem with your name of the entity set here. So it throws the error here. You can check that in the console section. What you can do is let me move this side so that you can write some comments here. So here, what you need to do is first run app in browser. Then press F12. Go to console section. And then check the error. Very simple. Just follow this technique. Whenever you are not getting the output or whenever you're getting errors, just follow this. To identify what is the error, this is the approach you can follow. In browser itself, you can go to console section to recognize the problem. If there is any syntax error, that also will be displayed here. So that means the problem here is it is not recognizing the entity set, EMP with lowercase. So let us correct it now. EMP set is an entity set, it is case sensitive. So in the backend, it is in uppercase, so you have to use uppercase here. Now save it and you can run it. So now there is multi-combo box. It's not displaying. S is uppercase, EMP set, and S is also uppercase. So let me save and run it. Now we are able to get this multi-combo box values from backend with the help of entity set. Entity set is matching, so we are able to get it. Right, so not only that, here user ID, first name. So these are also case sensitive. For example, first name, if I use F lowercase, first name in the backend, F is uppercase, it is registered like that. And if I am using F as lowercase in the front end, then there is a problem. Let me run it again. So multi-combo box, you can see it is not showing the values now. It is just showing the total record count with those many checkboxes, but it is not showing the values. It's not showing first name here. There's a problem. Press F12. Now you can see in this case it is not showing any error. But in the output it is not showing the values. That itself will help you to understand. The values are not populated. So there is a problem with the odata field name. Field name is not matching. So here use F uppercase. Because in the backend odata service it is registered with F as uppercase. Now if I go to multi-combo box, now the values are displayed here. So the point is very simple. OData field names are case sensitive. OData entity set names are also case sensitive. Very simple. And rule 5 is the easiest of all the rules. So never forget rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, and rule 4. Rule 5 is never forget rule 1, rule 2, rule 3, rule 4 while writing the code in XML files. Okay, so everything is fine now. If you have any doubts, you can ask me now.
Hello,
yeah,
sir.
I have a doubt. Yeah.
Be specific to the yesterday's session and today's session, okay? So don't ask the future topics like Launchpad, integration. Don't ask those things. Be specific to the topics. Yeah, doubts, you can unmute and
Yeah,
speak.
actually, for each and every screen element, there is aggregation property, right? For simple screen element also there is aggregation property, right?
There's an aggregation property, but the cardinality will not be 0 to n. Even then, if it is 0 to n, then it won't work like that. There are aggregation properties, but it won't work for simple screen elements.
Okay, and when I am pressing Control S, Control space in the editor, there are two things are coming. One is class, it is in green color, and the one other is coming with a like notepad icon. If I am pressing there, it is means giving all kind of property and aggregation property in the editor.
Yes, so if you select first option, it will show all properties. It will show all properties, all events will be displayed here, but that looks clumsy here. Say suppose if I use, for example, if I use multi-combo box, if I use this first option, or say suppose if I use select screen element here. Select screen element with class name is available and it is available with notepad option. If I select this notepad option, then it will load all the properties. You have to supply all the properties here. So that looks clumsy here. Whichever properties are required, use those things. Now just for select screen element, that is for drop down, all the properties are displayed here. So that's the purpose of the first option. If I use, for example, select, if I use this notepad icon here, then it will load all the properties. You can see events, etc.
And for aggregation property and all, So how will find that it belongs to which library? Only through documentation, or is there any other way?
Documentation. The documentation is clear, right? So, but through documentation itself, you can. Through documentation, through practice, then only you will be able to recognize.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Next down.
Yeah, Aftab, sir. Aftab, hello.
Yeah, what's it down?
Doubt, actually, I done the mistake. Creating time template of the work list. I fill up everything by what you given detail, but selection of the template, actually in my screen, there is a difference. But by mistake, I selected the master template and I have created the project. So what is the solution to correct it? Yeah, delete it, yeah, again,
You can
create
delete
new?
that project anytime. You can delete that. You can right click and delete it. Here you
Okay.
can see. And you can create a new
Oh.
project.
Okay, this is the
You can
solution.
create a new project.
And what about the master template? If you are going to create, what odata services name I'll take?
You can use the same odata service name even for master detail.
No issue.
There won't be any issue, but slightly the coding area may change. The output location may change because the template is different. When the template is different, output appearance will change.
Okay.
Code will work. The code will work in both the templates, but the output point of view, there is split tab option for master detail. Okay, first practice with worklist template. After getting idea, then you can shift to another template.
Yeah, okay. Remaining thing, what is the odata field name? I have to fill up same thing for both, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Same for all types of templates.
Okay.
Whatever code we are writing here, it also works in master detail templates. But the only thing is, in master detail template, you'll get output with split tab, 2 screens in one page. That's how it is loaded. But in case of worklist template, you are getting each screen separately here. Screen 1, screen 2.
Yeah. So creating of work list and what is the called master template, the details should be same, correct, sir? Only name will be changed only.
Yes, template name will change. You can give the same remaining details as same.
Okay. And what is the cardinal list? What cardinal 0 to n something? I'm not getting this.
Cardinality is just like the record capacity.
Okay.
In terms of here, it's like record count with min count and maximum count.
Okay.
So 0 to n is the range. 0 to n is a range. There can be 0 records, 1 record, or any number of records. That's the meaning of 0 to n.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Cardinality is record.
Unmuted.
It's a range, min count to hyphen max count. 0, that means you can populate 0 records, 1 record, or a number of records if the cardinality is 0 to n.
Okay. Thank you.
That is used when we use that class in the event handlers. When we write the code in the controllers, then that constructor will be helpful. So when we write the code in controllers, we are going to deal with that. We are going to load properties through constructor also. We can set properties or its values via constructor. That should happen when we create an object. When we create an object for a class via controller. So that you'll understand in the coming days. We can set properties or values via constructor. But that constructor property values can be set only through creating an object explicitly for that class when we write the code in controller or event handlers. In the future topics, you'll understand that. So here, for example, we can use var, and we can use, for example, input screen element, new. We can use the library, sap.m, something like this. And then you can use input as a class name. Here you can use a constructor. Here we are trying to create object for input class. And that input class can have properties here. So here you can provide properties, like for example, value is a property, and you can provide some X value, 1001. So that means we're creating objects. We're creating object for input class by using new keyword, and we are setting the value property with some default value, for example, 1001. So here constructor will be loaded in this case. And if you want to set another property, for example, max length. So here also you can use some max length. For example, I want to allow 10 characters. So this property values we are setting through constructor while creating object for input class in this case. We are creating object for input class by using new keyword. So here constructor plays an important role. And this type of code we write in controllers, not in XML files. This type of code, when we want to create an input field dynamically, in that case, this type of code has to be implemented in controller. Through constructors, we can initialize the values. We can set the values to the properties. Yeah, next down.
Hi, Vijay.
Sir, I have a doubt regarding odata for today class. Who will give the, in real life, if you see Fiori resource and odata resource are different, so how to get the odata exactly field name for binding? Is there any except metadata that file? Is there any other way?
Metadata is one thing. Then other thing is you can go to SCGWT code, or you need to ask explicitly if your team is different, odata team and front-end Fiori team is different, then you have to ask it explicitly, or else go to SCGW and check this list of services. They will provide the service name, and they will provide you to access that service from the web ID. So in that case, when you use that service, automatically you'll get metadata.xml file. So from here also you can get that.
Okay.
So when you're working in a team environment, you will be able to recognize that. That won't be an issue. So they will provide the list of services that has to be consumed in different applications. And they will provide the markup screens. The screen should look like so and so. Then based on that, you have to decide the bindings. Which field is required for that screen? That field you have to use it in binding. And how to recognize that field? Go to metadata.xml file or go to SCGW.
Okay.
Yeah, next.
Vijay, can you please show SCGW for once? SCGW for this, how when we are fetching the data from the backend, how is it? Is it the get entity or get entity set?
Here we are getting collection of records. So internally get entity set method will be triggered. It is executing select query. And it is fetching the data. So when we go for OData development, then you'll understand how to write select queries, where to write those select queries, insert, delete, update, etc. So here in our case, we are fetching the data here because we are able to get the data here, right? The list of values. So these values are populated because entity set is holding the data. Entity set is fetching the data with the help of select query. In get entity set method of OData service, this method will be available. Get entity set method contains select query. Select query will fetch data from backend to entity set, and entity set will supply data to front-end screens.
Yeah, because in the entity set we have, in the select query I see we have conditions, right, where IV filter string where we are passing it.
That is different story. How to use filters, that we are going to discuss later. Here we are not applying any filter at this stage. We are getting all records by default.
Okay. Another quick note from yesterday's.
We are going to set filters in the coming days. How to fetch data based on input filters. That's a different story we are going to discuss. But as of now, it is fetching all records here. Please remember that.
But in that case, the entity set which we are using for this particular odata project, right? So it has got that select query only if you go to a CW.
That's what I'm saying. It contains select query. What's the problem?
But in the select query, we have that filter option, so we are not passing any parameter to it, right?
If you're not passing any value, then by default it will get. That's the behavior of that method.
Okay.
Get entity set method will fetch all records by default if you're not passing any filters, even though you have used filter string in the backend.
Okay.
By default, all records are fetched when we don't pass any inputs. How to pass input and how to get specific records, that's a separate topic. We are going to do it.
Okay. Another quick
Other
note from
students also
yesterday's-
please remember, by default here, all records are fetched to the front end because as of now, we are not passing any input. We are going to pass input through controllers, then we'll be able to get the specific data, specific records. Yeah, next note.
Another note regarding suggestion items. So, but for the multi-input, when we are giving the suggestion items, right, Vijay? So I tried without giving the suggestion items. Also, it is, suggesting the values from the.
It is getting the values, right? It is getting the values. Why? Because it's a default. Even though you don't use it, it will work because it's a default aggregation property.
Suggestion items, okay.
Yeah, wherever there is a default in the documentation, those things I think you need not use it explicitly. But just for our convenient purpose to understand the basics, we used it explicitly, even though it is a default, just to understand the fundamentals to build up the foundation.
Okay. And for tokenizer, so when we are clicking on the cross button over there, it never reloads in the page, right?
Tokenizer, I think it is just for display purpose, right?
Reloading will not happen for that. When we see multiple entries, so when the page loads for the first time, we have multiple entries, whatever is hard coded. So if we click on the cross next to the name, so it never comes back, even if we go. So
it will not come back. It is meant just for displaying the values. It is just to show the list of values, possible values, something like that.
Okay.
It will not load. It is just for display purpose. It has to be used with other screen elements. For example, there will be an input field. Beside that field, you can have a list of values, something like this. There can be an input field. For that input field, you can attach a tokenizer values. For example, something like this. So here we have to attach this tokenizer with input screen element here, input field. So then the point here is whatever input user want to provide, that user input can be from out of this tokenizer displayed values. This is just like information. It's not meant for triggering. It is not meant for triggering any event handler. It is just to suggest the values, what can be provided as part of input field that is displayed here in the form of tokens. So it is technically an interrelated screen element. It should not be used individually. It has to be attached to, tokenizer can be attached to input field, or it can be attached to something like some password field or some other screen elements here. So it will show possible values here. Possible value is Ajay, Vijay, Suman, Kiran. Something like according to validation. So the possible values are displayed in the form of tokens, and out of those possible values, user can provide some input here. That's how it is used in general.
Okay. Thank
you. Vijay, I have a question, Vijay. So when we are loading data from entity, right? When we have the data in the entity, can we filter it on the UI instead of using a select statement and filter statement at the back end? Can we manipulate the data and just assign few values to the element, front-end element?
Yes, there also we have to use front-end filters. We have to use in that case. Yes, it is possible. So we can filter. data within front-end app without executing select query. First time it has to execute select query. Otherwise, you
Yeah.
won't get the data. First time,
So
always you get the data. After that, within the entity set. Entity set is in the backend, but the data is displayed in the front end. So at entity set level, we are going to filter the data. The filtering the data can happen in the front end side. Even though entity set holds the data in the backend, filtering can be applied in the front end.
my question is like, I don't want to pass any filter value again to the backend within on the front end, like using
That's what I'm
if
saying.
statements. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. So we can apply filter directly on the front end itself without passing the values to the backend. Why? Because entity set is holding the data. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Okay. Entity set is a mediator. It is a mediator between backend and the front end. Okay. So once after getting the data, first time when you get the data to entity set, the data is displayed. But if you want to filter the data within the entity set, you have to filter the data. You need not send the values as input to the select query. You can just pass the filters to entity set itself. Entity set itself will filter the data. Or else, if you want, you can use different screen element, SAP Fieri list report. That behavior is by default available. Especially for reporting, this will be suitable. SAP Fieri list report Fieri element. To use that, then you'll get all selection screen with filters here. And by default, table output. So here, you'll get some selection screen option. So when you use these things in the front end itself, this filtering will happen. If you are using SAP Fieri list report element. Template or master detail template, then you have to filter the data in the entity set level. If you
Is
don't
there
want
a
to execute
syntax
select.
like is there a syntax like how we can do that?
Here we have to use like table screen element dot something like filter, and we have to pass filters here.
Muted.
In controller. So on screen element, you can call some method like filter is one of the method. For that, you can pass collection of input filters here. But this type of code has to be implemented in controller, not in the view file. In controller, if you want, you can write the code in on init method or in any event handlers. Yeah, next down. When we discuss table, then we'll get more clarity because table is not yet arrived. So we are going to discuss the table in the next week. So you'll get more clarity.
Vijay, that means like it's not to show the duplicate values in the help, right? This one filters.
Not only just for duplicate. If you want to avoid duplicates, you can use duplicates as false. I think there is some property. You can try this. On screen element, there is a property. If you want to avoid duplicates, use a screen element class. For example, select screen element. For that, you can use one property like duplicates and make it false.
Yeah, like as we see now, if you're showing the field first name, it was showing the duplicate